Hi everyone, and welcome to what is officially 3 of your hardware unit in S2. What I want you to do for your starter today is pause the video and have a little think about what type of device you think these 3 devices are. Are they input or output? Okay, hopefully you've had a little bit of time to think about it. I'm going to start with the one on the left, which is the printer, and hopefully you've guessed it right, it is an output device. Okay, this printer doesn't have a scanner or anything built in, so it is just for outputting data into a hard copy that you would find inside your computer system. Now the middle one was to kind of to trip you up a little bit. It is a webcam, although it's type maybe a device you haven't seen much before, because usually your webcams are built into your laptops or your tablets or your phones nowadays. But this is one that you would buy for perhaps a desktop computer that doesn't have a camera built in. Okay, so that's a webcam, it's an input device. And the last one was a bit of a trick question because it is actually a gaming headset that you would use if you were playing Xbox Live online with your friends or on your computer or whatever. It's actually both because the headphones part of it is outputting sound, but the microphone part of it on the front is inputting sound. So it actually is both an input and an output device. Effectively, two separate devices joined into one to create a headset device. Okay, so today's lesson, rather than looking at input and output devices, we're going to start having a little look at the inside of the PC, and hopefully by the end of today's lesson you'll be able to identify and maybe describe some of the different parts of the inside of a computer system. So back to our computer from last week, we had a little look at output devices, we had a little look at input devices. So today what we're going to do is go inside this box. Now this computer box, sometimes known as the systems box or the central processing unit sometimes. Okay, inside there is all the bits that make your computer work. Okay, and this is what it looks like. Now this is quite a dark picture. If you Google inside a computer box online, you'll find lots of different types of pictures. And actually your task today is going to be looking at a couple of inside boxes and seeing if you can name some of the parts. Okay, so we're going to start off with this big metal sheet that's along the bottom. It's a little bit difficult to see, but right along the bottom of your computer, and on most computer systems, you'll find one of these, and it's called a motherboard. Now, I love motherboards because I kind of think they look like tiny little cities where like ants or tiny people, borrowers, might live. Okay, but if you have a little look about it, obviously there's loads of things on there. We don't need to know what they all do. In fact, I don't even know what they all do. Okay, but there is a few things that I want to point out. Okay, someplace on your motherboard, you're going to get something that looks like this, like a football stadium. It's kind of like a very obvious square. Sometimes it'll have spikes and stuff on top of it to help with cooling. That is called the processor, okay, which is the main brain of the computer. And we're going to spend a whole lesson talking about that next week, okay? But that processor is really important because it effectively is what the computer does. Everything is important based on that processor. Okay, you also get these long clip parts which are for RAM memory. I think they look like train tracks. Okay, that's for RAM memory inside the computer system, and that stores everything that you're currently working on. Again, we're going to talk about that in a big way next week. Okay, but processor and memory, very important two things to point out on the motherboard. Okay, there's also lots of other various different types of like bug looking chips and ROM chips and stuff like that. But for the most part in S2, we don't really need to know too complex what all those different bits are. Okay, now if we go back to the main computer box, you can see that we've got various other components, and these will change in shape and size based on what different type of computer you have, if it's a gaming computer or a non-gaming computer. Okay, now one of the things I want to point out is down here and up here we have got fans. Okay, now this one's really important because it's blowing over the area where the processor is, and that obviously a processor, I told you, is very, very important. If I click on that fan, that is the cooling system. Okay, now some fans will just have a generic, some computers will just have a generic fan system where they're blowing cold air. Other ones will have proper cooling systems that have got water or liquid cooling systems inside them, and that's for more powerful computers to make sure they stay nice and cool, because the brain or the head of the computer can get very, very hot, and obviously you don't want any fires or anything to start. Okay, so cooling systems are used to keep the place nice and cold. Okay, we've then got this big device up here, which is your hard disk drive. Okay, so that's for storing things. And if you go into the hard disk drive, there's lots of different types of back-end storage that you can get. Okay, the hard disk drive that's built into the computer is the main one, but you do get external hard drives as well. But you obviously get things like CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, USB sticks. There's lots of different types of storage and devices. Okay, what's important to remember about them is that apart from the hard disk drive, most of them are not built into the computer system. So for lots of them, you have what's called the driver or the drive. So you might have a CD drive, which is the wee tray that comes out, but you don't actually, the CD is not built into the computer, if that makes sense. That's called the medium or the media where your data is actually stored, okay? But your hard disk drive is actually built into your computer. And sometimes they have something called a solid state drive built into your computer system. Now, the important thing to remember about backend storage is it's used to permanently store data when your computer is turned off, okay? So if you've saved something, you turn your computer off, turn it back on, it's still there, which doesn't happen with the main memory, as we'll talk more about next week. Okay, now between the hard drive and the processor there, or the motherboard, there's these big huge cables. Now, there's cabling throughout the whole of the computer system. Everything is connected by cables, okay? So they're really important. At S2 level, we don't really need to know too much about the cables, but what we tend to call the cables are buses, okay? So it's a very simplistic term for something that's a lot more complicated than that. But as you move up the years in computing, we'll explain to you properly what buses are. But anywhere you see cables at the moment, you can just call them buses for communication. And then when you move into S3, we'll explain what buses and things are properly. But so anywhere you see cables, you can call that a bus. Okay. Now this big thing here is actually 1, 2, 3 graphics cards, and that's because this is a gaming computer. Okay, now graphics cards don't always look this fancy like those ones you just seen. They can actually just look like this, which is a computer chip. On its side, these bits would be plugged into the motherboard, and then the bits along the back here actually become part of the back of your computer box, so they link in like a proper card, because all computers need graphics card to be able to show you what's on the screen, process any graphics that you might be drawing or creating, and obviously if you're into gaming, you want a high quality graphics card. You can see this one on the right, it'll have its own processor, its own memory, and its own fans built in to make sure that it's really high performing, and that's why this computer actually has 3 times that. Okay, but some of your other ones might have 1. This GeForce GTX is a really easy way to spot it. NVIDIA GeForce is one of the most popular types of graphics card that you get on the market just now. However, there are plenty of others. Now, down on the bottom left-hand side, this other fan that I kind of mentioned earlier on is actually in front of the big electrical box that allows your computer to work, the bit that plugs into the wall effectively, okay? That's your power supply. Oh, there's a little bit of overlap here, but anyway. All computers that run off electricity obviously need to be able to plug into the wall, so they will have a power supply, and you recognise the power supply because it's this big box, and it's usually got lots of labels and stuff on the side, so you should be able to spot it when you're looking inside the computer system. Okay, smaller devices, your phones, your tablets, your laptops, etc., they will usually have a battery that's held inside, so they won't have the same type of looking power supply. But when you plug it into the computer, the battery is charged up, and that's what allows you to have that portability that you don't have with a desktop computer. Okay, so that's the inside of the computer system, and that's what I want you to really focus on today when you're doing today's task, which I'll show you in a wee second. Okay, so hopefully you have understood a lot of things that I've looked at. You can identify the different parts of the computer system. When you have completed your worksheet for this week and submitted it, your practical task, if you want to do it, is basically to try and do the same as what was demonstrated in last week's video. So trying to create a clear box over the top of here, which will take you to another slide that's got a picture of an inside of computer, and then clear boxes over any of the individual parts that you want to show more information on. Okay, if you obviously play and pause the video, you're welcome to steal some of the information that's off of my PowerPoint, or you can do a little bit of research of your own online if you like. But again, remember, all of the practical work for this unit is optional because the main focus is on the theory and whether you understand it. Okay, so this is your worksheet for today. Okay, so it's nice and simple. There's just 2 pictures of inside the computer boxes. This one's a bit more of a simple run-of-the-mill older computer, and the one at the bottom is your kind of higher tech, more geared towards gaming computer. Okay, now what I would suggest is if you are printing these off and you're going to be actually drawing on them and labeling them, that's totally fine. But what you might want to do is still have them open on the computer system, because I think it's much easier to see what's going on in these pictures with the colour. If it's not printing off in colour, it prints off in black and white, it makes it a lot more complicated. Obviously, you're more than welcome to just do it on the computer system as well and use text box and stuff too. Okay, if you are doing it or completely in your jotter and you can't print, or you don't have a printer, or you don't have ICT, then just do your best to try and kind of draw the square and the kind of big components and point to me what you think different things are. Okay, so if we zoom in on this, hopefully you can see things like that city motherboard, the important bit inside the motherboard, so the kind of processor's kind of hidden behind a fan this time. So there's a fan on top. There's also lots of other fans, notice fans all over the place. Okay, cards that are up on their side, sound cards and graphics cards, power supplies and things. So I want you to try and just name what you can see. So they might have more than one of things. So look, there's 3 different hard drives. Okay, so point to what you can. And one note I should say is that they don't have everything. Okay, so just because you can't see something, just because you can't see a sound card, maybe it doesn't have it, or maybe it's behind something you can't see. So don't worry too much. Just try to name as many parts as you can and then hand your worksheet in for this week. Okay, any questions, drop me a message, and I hope you have fun. Speak to you later. Bye.